Okay folks, we got a fun one here. This is an original 1920s Weissenborn Style 1 lap steel guitar in the Hawaiian style with his characteristic hollow neck design here and large body. You know, it's difficult to date these things exactly. There are people online who are really into them and who have a better shot of doing that. I know it's made between 1923 and 1928. That's when he was using this branding iron stamp as opposed to a paper label. Take a look for a second there and just appreciate the circular saw marks on the inside of the back. Like there was no effort made to clean those up. All the attention was focused on the outside. But these guys who are into it can sort of document the level of wear on that branding iron, and as it got older, you know, parts started to fade. This is a batwing style bridge in curly maple, which is a little unusual. Although Herman was a violin maker before he started building these, and he used his old supply of maple for bridges in the teens and into the 20s, so it's not unheard of. It's 6 1/4 inches long, which means that it was built earlier on in the decade. And it's also got a V-shaped alignment to the bridge pins. As the decade wore on, that becomes much more of a smiley face. You can see it's got a screw here that runs through the bridge down into the bridge pad. That's actually original. This would have been covered with a pearl dot, which has long since disappeared. There are several repaired cracks on both the top and the back here, and they're kind of interesting. It looks like they were filled with glue or some kind of putty. And the top surface of them it's proud of the surface, almost like a bead of caulking over top. It's not offensive, it's just something I've never seen before. Don't know why that is. The finish on these was originally orange shellac, and something tells me this is not the original surface I'm seeing here. It's pretty cloudy, and there's evidence in a few spots of places where there have been runs and sags or drips. So it may have actually been oversprayed with something at some point. And a lot of the pristine examples I've seen online, this would be, you know, it has a characteristic crackled effect all over, which this does not demonstrate. And it just, I mean, it's dirty, but it also looks kind of hazy. So I don't know what that is. Maybe we can test it at some point. Here's the reason it's in for repair. There's a long seam separation between the top and the side, and a nasty crack that runs across the end block along a grain line up into the lower bout. There's a little fragment here which is just holding on, doing its best. Two halves of this crack are in misalignment. It's as if the top surface was actually pushed inward quite a ways. I can't use finger pressure to pull them together. It's very stiff, under a lot of tension. So I think this was probably dropped onto the end pin at some point and just caved things inwards. The end pin is actually kind of cool too. It's not plastic or wood, and it's got a strange chalky texture. Little fragments come off almost like talcum powder. So I think this is actually ivory that has deteriorated. Maybe rotted is the best word. Cool. There are some loose braces in the lower bout, at least. And everything is really dirty in these cracks, which leads me to think that maybe it's been open for a very long time. It's fully oxidized. There are a lot of dust bunnies, a lot of spider webs and crud, just dirt. So I'm wondering what the best thing to do is, and I think that might be taking off the back, which is a scary proposition and a little bit counterintuitive since it's the top surface that's loose. But I'm thinking that if I take off the top, I got to worry about the bridge and the fretboard and keeping things aligned. You want to maintain the nice symmetrical curves of the top. Sometimes you take off a plate and it doesn't go back into perfect alignment. So if I take off the back, I might not have to take it off all the way. I could probably loosen it up to here and see how it goes. If I get some props in there, I can have enough space to, you know, put some clamps in and align this crack together and keep things fastened. So this is going to be a fun one, but we'll get it done. So obviously you want to take your time and do this with a lot of precision and care. There are two different knives I use. This is a broad-bladed artist's palette knife, and this one here is like a spackling knife used for drywall repairs, that kind of thing, putting plaster on patches. They have thin edges, like I've ground this one down so that it's kind of wedge-shaped on the edge. You don't want them sharp, you want them thin. If that makes any sense, and round off the corners so there's less chance of poking into the wood and causing divots or scratches or, doing damage that way. In practice, I get the thin edge of the knife into the joint, the heel of the blade, and I support the area just ahead of the part that's getting cut, so there's less chance for things to go fast. You don't want anything to be a surprise. I just rock it back and forth gently, and I'm riding on top of the curved lining underneath here, so the knife is in the same plane as the back. I know that the braces on this are probably loose at the ends and they're not a great fit in the pockets, so the knife will probably just skate right over or between them and the brace. This takes a long time. This will be 45 minutes worth of work probably. You just sort of sit back, put on a podcast, and you can hear it click. The hide glue is quite dry and it comes off kind of like a zipper. So you just work back and forth. If there are places that are stuck, you can put a little bit of denatured alcohol, just a couple of drops on the blade. That gets into the joint, it seeps in, and it works like a desiccant. It gets in there, dries out, and cools off the hide glue, and makes it more likely to crack free. So this is what I'm going to be doing for a while. In the end, I decided it was best to take the back off completely. Okay, you ready for this? Came off pretty clean. There we go. There's the back. And the interior. Looking at the back here, there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason in terms of grain direction for the back braces, which are, it seems, like a western red cedar. These ones are flat sawn, these ones are kind of at a 45-degree angle, this one is pretty close to quarter sawn. And you have sort of a multi-part back strip here, different sizes, different shapes. I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but there's a little penciled annotation here on both the side and to the top of this brace. It says Koa. So I guess maybe they were selecting certain braces for use with certain woods. Here's the interior. You can see where the split side is. There are loose braces down here, both of these. Everything is really filthy. Up in the neck channel area here, that appears to be spruce or something like it. There is a little cross beam here which was simply tacked into the lining. There's that. I'm going to have to replace that, I guess. I took a picture, I know where it goes. There were lots of loose braces on both the back and the top. Ugh. For the damaged end here, I think the place to start is the end block. I'm going to make an overlay of spruce, which will go against it, and try to straighten it out and bolster it. It's got the crack running through it here. I'm not going to remove the end pin. I'm just going to make a hole in that overlay because this is in there really tightly, and I don't want to risk, trying to pull it out and damage the sides more than they've already been damaged. So I'm just going to glue that on with hide glue, but first I got to get it clean. I'm going to sand it a little bit too, just to get past this oxidized wood. Speed is of the essence when you're using hot hide glue. I'm just warming up the parts here. Actually, my shop gets good and hot in the summer with the dehumidifier running. It's close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which helps. Gives you a few extra seconds before the glue gels. The glue I use is a lot cleaner than the stuff that's in the guitar. I think they were just adding fresh glue to the old crusty stuff that was in their glue pot every day. Probably smelled pretty funky at the time. Got a corked backed caul on the outside and a plastic one on the inside. get those in position and put the clamps on. I'm just trying to figure out the correct order of operations in order to do this right. I know I have to close up the crack in the side before I try to bend the side into position with the outline of the guitar. Looking at that crack, it actually extends quite a way up into almost the waist area. After I got it cleaned up, I can see that. There's actually some glue in the crack in this area. It has previously been glued. It's only loose at this point from here on down, which is nice. So it's kind of a long, painstaking procedure. I probably won't film the actual glue up. I'm going to use fish glue rather than hide glue so that it gives me a little bit longer open time. And it's very fussy. I just have to make sure the side gets right where I want it, then put pressure on with the clamps. I'll start at the far end of the crack and then work my way in towards the end block. And yeah, so I'm just going to do that. After I've finished that, I'll put some cleats on. You can see I've put some on the previously repaired cracks on the top. I'll cleat that crack along the length just to keep it together and make sure it's not going to come apart again. It's just about time to replace the back, which is a really good feeling. The neck shaft area up here fits perfectly back together. It's made it exactly right. However, regluing those braces has changed the shape of both the back and the body slightly. Even though they've only been apart for about 18 hours, that's enough to do some, shifting has occurred. I guess flattening the back a little bit and arching the top has made the back slightly wider than the opening of the body at the top of the sides. This happens a lot, especially if you take an old back off, stresses, things happen. So when you're doing this kind of work, pushing a side that has splayed outwards into line with the body is not that difficult. You can do it with some finger pressure, you get the clamps on there and it holds. In the other case, which this is, where the side is actually pressed inwards and there's a lip or an overhang, that is much more difficult to deal with. Pulling that out and into line, not easy, So I've developed a trick which is probably worth the price of admission for the other repair guys. So pay attention to this one. What I've done is I've actually taken green painter's tape and I've gone all the way around the portion of the body that doesn't line up exactly. And I've taken little slips, little posts of spruce, and I've super glued them directly onto that painter's tape. Now, obviously, if you've got a really, delicate finish that's got all kinds of cracks in it, if it's a lacquer from 1949, this is probably not a great technique for that. You will pull the tape off and most of the lacquer will come right off with it. In this case, the shellac is good and sticky, and whatever is on there on top of the shellac is bonded nicely. I did a little bit of a test previously. This is not an issue. I can pull this tape off. I won't leave it on there very long. It'll be on there for about 8 hours and it'll come right off again. If I need to, I can heat it up a little bit with a hairdryer. So those little posts, what they let me do is they hold the sides outwards slightly, and this back will actually fall directly into place. It clips into place all the way around and holds the outline in good relationship. So I'm going to be using the fish glue to do this. Either case, you got to do this as a multi-step thing. You get a certain portion lined up, you put the glue in there, you get the clamps on, let it set, move on and do it, in stages all the way around so that you're not in a rush. The last thing you want to do is brush glue on the entire 40-inch outline of each side because, you're just not going to get it clamped together in time. So that's what I'll do. I'll put some glue on, put some clamps on, and just go all the way around the body. Then it'll be time for some touch-up. There's some glue residue that's stuck to the surface here from around the clamps. The nice thing about using either fish glue or hide glue is that you can clean up with cold water. You just sort of rehydrate the surface a little bit and a little bit of scrubbing and it comes right off. Here's that area along the crack in the body where that big chip was. I've managed to glue that back down, but there were some voids on either side. I've taken some medium viscosity super glue and got that in along the entire length of the crack and on those areas. After that, I put a couple of brushed coats of orange shellac over top, and I'm just using a single edge razor blade with some plastic tape on it on the corners, so I'm not going to dig them into the finish, and I'm just going to level that After this, I'll put some more shellac over top, and I will eventually sand that back down and bring it up to a finish sort of similar to the rest of the instrument using micro mesh abrasive pads. I cleaned the entire guitar using naphtha, which is a pretty benign solvent. It doesn't hurt the shellac finish that was on this previously. I just put new strings on the Weissenborn. That looks a whole lot better than it did. The top and back are glued down in place. The side is now firmly secured. The crack is level and nicely shored up from the inside. Looks okay. You know, it's obviously been repaired, but it looks well taken care of. I'm pretty happy with that. So this guitar, wow, this guitar has more sustain than any other acoustic instrument I've ever heard. It just rings on forever and ever. It's really shimmery, there's a lot of overtones. Gorgeous guitar. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again soon.